I'm Felicia Shakiba, and this is CPO Playbook, where we solve a business challenge in every episode. Artificial intelligence has rapidly shifted from a buzzword to a driving force reshaping industries, and HR is no exception. But with every innovation comes new challenges. How do organizations implement AI responsibly, ensure inclusivity, and achieve meaningful ROI? Today, I'm joined by Mark Sankarsingh, a thought leader in HR tech at PepsiCo, who's navigating these challenges head-on. From accelerating product roadmaps to aligning AI with organizational goals, Mark shares how PepsiCo is harnessing AI to transform HR while maintaining a sharp focus on responsibility and strategy. Let's dig into how one of the largest global companies is embracing the future of work through AI. Mark, it's great to see you again.
Great to see you again, Felicia. Good afternoon. It was great meeting you at HR Tech, and I'm looking forward to our chat.
Absolutely, me too. Mark, to start, how has AI evolved in PepsiCo's HR landscape over the last 2 years? And what sparked this shift in focus for PepsiCo?
It's evolving. It's evolving. So like many companies, AI was a game changer 2 years ago, I think, with the introduction of ChatGPT. And so there's a lot of hype, excitement. Companies are still grasping with, hey, how do I get the best benefit out of AI? How do I implement it responsibly? And so we're doing different things in different pockets, but we are evolving it very methodically, ensuring that we're doing it responsibly.
And when starting this journey, what are you looking for exactly? What are the gaps you're really hoping AI will solve in the workforce?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things that we see immediately. And the first thing is employee productivity, right? So capability like Copilot, conversational chatbots, right? All that's increasing how quickly employees get their work done day to day. That then is transitioning to or evolving into agentic AI, which is then, hey, a bot that can actually do a transaction end to end. So first we're starting with, hey, let's see what we can tap into to make our employees more productive. But then I think eventually that's going to evolve into, hey, where there's really truly just transactional operational work, agentic AI is coming. It's not quite there, but I think it's on the precipice, and soon we'll be looking at that as well.
Let's take a step back because I feel like there's more to unpack there. When you think about productivity and you talked about co-piloting, are there specific functions that you look at first for productivity, or do you start by region? How do you go about, do you do a discovery about where in the organization we want to be more productive and then go from there? How do you figure that out?
I can comment from a HR technology lens, right? Which really touches all employees. So if you think about what tools that I provide to PepsiCo daily that enable HR and employees, so you can go through the tech stack in talent acquisition, total rewards, talent, learning management, right? There are ways I'll take performance management as an example, and something we're looking at today. Let's say an employee is writing their objectives for this year. There's now Gen AI embedded in applications that will suggest. So you can put in, hey, tell me how to increase revenue by 10% in the South region. It will actually give you something, right? And then that's a great start. Something more, targeted to what you're working on, obviously, although that may be an actual use case. But you can imagine the amount of time that's saving in terms of having to generate that from scratch, and you just tweak it. On the flip side, when it comes to year end and having to do manager assessments, there's now a capability in the tools today where you can ask, hey, can you summarize for me based on how the employee assessed their own objectives for the year or goals, accomplishments? Can you give me a summary, right? So it provides that, and then you can tweak it accordingly. I mean, that's just one example in performance management. Multiply that by the rest of the tech stack, talent acquisition, all the pre-screening that's happening via AI, and the automatic interview scheduling, for example, learning management, automatically using algorithms based on your profile to recommend learning courses for you. So this is all work that would have been done manually before, or took a fair amount of time, where now AI is doing it very quickly, and by default, that enhancing our productivity.
Okay, so I heard performance management processes. I heard uh, learning and development and talent acquisition, screening, perhaps. Where would you say, would you go deeper into those functions and try and figure out how to use it more efficiently in those functions? Or would you say, okay, we've tapped some of these, processes, let's move on and see where else we can go? Like what's next?
Yeah, so we're somewhat wedded for HR tech. We are primarily a SaaS shop, software as a service. So we are, and I'm a full proponent of the fully integrated suite, meaning having as much as we can in one ERP versus having just core HR and a bunch of bolt-on applications. So we've been moving more and more as these ERP solutions, and it's the big three: Oracle, Workday, and SAP, have been developing their product in this way and embedding AI because of the recent explosion. So I would say we're somewhat wedded to that, and we're very interested in whatever they have, right? In some ways, we're co-innovating. In some ways, we are influencing their strategic product roadmap. But we're probably going at that pace. There may be some outliers where we may do some bolt-on systems and some different things. But for the most part, we're sort of following what's happening with those ERPs and then implementing accordingly.
Interesting. So I think there's a lot of different ways to do it, but it's really interesting to kind of hear your approach. And I know that many organizations are really excited about generative AI, but implementing it responsibly, I think, is really key. So what guardrails does PepsiCo have in place to ensure transparency, fairness, and really using it ethically?
Yeah, great question. So PepsiCo was actually one of the first organizations to really embrace responsible AI and develop a framework for responsible AI very early on. And when you think about the frenetic pace of AI, certainly the capabilities haven't, or the really the guardrails, the governance haven't really kept pace with the capabilities. Right? Capabilities far exceeded the guardrails, and to a large extent, it still does. So PepsiCo came out very early on with there were 9 sort of principles that we had, which has since been replaced, by the way. And so we're following the OECD organizations for economic cooperation and development. So there are 42 some odd countries, 47 that are part of this, that have opted into this framework, which is really all about AI principles. And it's everything you just said. It's transparency, fairness, explainability, and then human centricity as well, and sustainability are part of the principles. And so we've used that as our framework. We've since embedded it into PepsiCo. And there were 2 pillars that sprung from that. There was an AI policy that really sort of governs how you go about implementing responsible AI, and the guardrails, and how you remain compliant with IT and so forth. And then there's an actual SOP, a standard operating procedure, in terms of how you track it and monitor it and ensure that you're implementing the AI policies correctly. There's also an entire governance committee. So when I talked earlier about all this capability that's coming up in our SaaS providers, we can't just willy-nilly turn those on. You actually have to go through a governance committee. That's a cross representation of legal, compliance, HR, information security, data scientists, that we have to kind of sit down and go through, okay, what does it do? We following our principles? Is there any bias, right? Especially in the talent acquisition space. So yeah, I feel very proud actually of where we are and the guardrails we have to implement AI responsibly.
How often are you meeting with the governance committee, and how many people would you say are on this committee?
As often as needed. And so there are about 7 people on the committee, sort of working members, and then there's a governance committee, oversight committee above that of more senior stakeholders. But so if tomorrow we decide, hey, we're interested in this AI, this Gen AI that's happening in one of my tech stacks, we'll have to tee that up, get all the information behind it, what it does, how it works, and then we present that to committee, and then there's a sort of a back and forth and a review and an approval before we move forward.
We'll be right back. Back to the show. Got it. Okay. And I think that's fair to say because, especially when you're creating a committee, I think it's really important to have those diverse voices across the organization. Otherwise, it's, you're reporting to, maybe some people with groupthink or only look at it in one way and one perspective. And I've seen that happen, unfortunately. But designing and creating a committee, I think, is really, really important to regulate the fairness and bring in all perspectives. And so I think that makes a lot of sense that you've done that. Recruiting, I know it really often highlights both the power and the pitfalls of AI. And so I wanted to find out if you can share how PepsiCo balances efficiency in hiring with avoiding biases in AI-driven tools.
Yeah, very, very carefully. And just to underscore your last point, that diversity on the AI committee, I've seen it firsthand. There's zero groupthink, which is what you want, right? You have people who are challenging and debating, and I think that just results in the right and the best outcome.
100%.
The recruiting space is a challenging one. When I said earlier that we had these 9 principles now following the OECD. It was one of the first platforms we looked at because that's where you probably have the most opportunity for bias or applying AI not responsibly or not even aware of it. So what we did was we literally went through the entire process end to end, hire to onboard, starting with attraction, right, and then engagement and how a candidate or candidates flow through the process. Because there's automation in there that's not quite AI, but there is selection, there is screening, there is down selection, there's automation like interview scheduling and so forth. That's fine. But at the end of the day, where we landed was there wasn't any bias because ultimately a human person makes a decision. Okay. And in terms of the screening and down selection, that's also reviewed, okay, to make sure that we didn't miss anything, giving our inclusive goals. So, we feel pretty comfortable in terms of our process and that we're applying it responsibly.
So during the screening, you leverage AI to screen some of the candidates. Is that after the first conversation, or is it like after someone submits submits like their job application?
It happens in multiple stages. So very early on. So if we're talking about a frontline, say candidate, there's a text to engage component. So this text to engage enables very high volume hiring. And based on the job specs, we'll ask certain questions. And we know that if it doesn't meet the job specs, and it could be something simple as, hey, can you work in this location? Or in our beverages sector, can you lift? Are you comfortable lifting more than 20 pounds or something like that, right? So they're targeted pre-screening questions that will then sort of accept you to the next stage. Or, well, no, you're not a fit, but we have you in our CRM, right? So we'll keep you warm and we have your profile and we'll see other AI being applied, algorithms to see if there's matches for other jobs. So that's one part. And then it continues on as it gets deep into the process.
Got it. Okay. And then you said that ultimately a human makes the decision on who gets the job. What about like the in-between? Are you still doing human interviews, or I guess, does it depend on the role or the level? How does that work?
We are doing human interviews. Are there robotic interviews happening today?
I've heard that there are, I mean, if you think about like wanting to submit a video interview, like sometimes there's been chatter about, submitting your video interview and then AI would determine whether or not, to move you forward in the process, right? Instead of actually having a human on the other side watch the video or actually do the interview themselves. So I'm just, curious. You guys do a lot of hiring. I mean, what are you at as far as headcount right now?
We're just north of 300,000, but that includes our frontline associates, which is a very intense process and a little different, which is 2/3 of our population versus the sort of the knowledge workers. We do employ one-way video interviewing. It's
Hmm.
not screened by a bot. So when someone submits an interview via our platform, it is actually reviewed by a human being and dispositioned accordingly.
Good to know.
Yeah.
I think that's good to know.
Yes, I don't think that would have passed the AI committee test for sure.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I'm learning right beside you and in the moment. So this is good information, I think, for me and for everyone listening. So it's great to hear just the details and how things work and the roadmap that you guys have. So it's great to hear you actually say what's actually happening and versus a lot of ambiguity that people have and don't have answers for. So all good stuff. I want to talk about rolling the new technology out because rolling out new tech or processes often meets resistance. And it would be good to learn more about your environment at PepsiCo. How do you approach change management to ensure that employees and leaders adopt the AI solutions effectively? I mean, there's probably little resistance that they would want to adopt it, or maybe not. Just you tell me.
Honestly, there's little to no resistance, and I think it's because the way we do it is very organic. It's not something, at least to date, we felt like we needed this big campaign or need to promote this or try to sell it. If anything, it's been more of a pull rather than a push, which is great because employees and managers are used to a consumer grade experience outside of the office, and so I think that appetite is there for AI and automation within the workplace. So when we do introduce stuff like Copilot or conversational bots or anything else that makes you more productive and efficient, like we talked about earlier, it's been well received and adopted, right? Because they understand what's in it for them. I think that's the underlying factor. So nothing to speak of in terms of any significant barriers in terms of adoption.
And what about implementing it effectively? So let's use performance management or goal setting, for example. I mean, there's the option to ask, you know, your AI copilot, what should be my goals, and then copying and pasting, right? There's like that scenario. But how are we making sure that people are actually really engaging in almost like a conversation or allowing the bot to challenge them in what could be or what should be their goals? Like how much involvement does a manager have? Are they reviewing? Are they having discussions? So we're really talking about how are we implementing it effectively, making sure that they use it the right way.
Yeah, great question. And so it really does rely on the process. So let me take you through the process at PepsiCo
Okay.
very quickly. It's what you said. So it starts with the employees developing and articulating their goals in the tool and actually submitting it to his or her manager. So that's the first step. The second step is yes, the manager actually goes in and reviews, could send it back via the system with notes to say, hey, I'm not sure about this. You may want to tweak this and so forth. But ultimately, it gets to a point where they meet, they have a discussion. Yep, we good. By the way, our goals don't ever lock, right? Because invariably goals change throughout the year. So you have the opportunity to go back and change, which generates a notification to the manager. Hey, Mark made a change, just FYI. I can then, okay, great, nothing for me to do, or engage with the employee and have them tweak that. So the process is very iterative, back and forth, which is great. But yes, ultimately, manager has approval. And I think what the feedback has been, hey, it kind of makes me a bit smarter. My goals are kind of more smart, right? And articulated maybe a little bit better, but the content of what you're trying to accomplish is the essence is still there, right? So yeah, I think the process works very well.
We'll be right back. Back to the show. PepsiCo has a massive workforce and tech stack for around 300,000 people. How do you decide whether to integrate AI capabilities from existing vendors versus exploring niche providers or standalone solutions? I know you alluded earlier that you prefer all-in-one suites, but what if you come across a new solution that could be 10 times better? How do you make that decision?
That is the bane of my existence.
It's a good question,
And
right?
it, and I suspect many that sit in my seat as well. It's again, it's balance. And so, yes. So let me maybe double click on, hey, for the most part, we do want to stay with the strategic product roadmap of our SaaS providers. Right? We want to influence them. We want to push them. I think since OpenAI or ChatGPT, they've been off to the races, and they've accelerated their product roadmap the past 2 years in ways I hadn't seen before. Right? You always kind of slow. They're kind of slow to market. They're always laggards. They're not leaders, but they're trying to catch up, and I think they're getting there. And you see it with I don't know, Workday acquiring Hired Score, for example, as a next gen AI sort of ATS and talent acquisition tool, or maybe even SAP with WalkMe for digital adoption, right? So we see them making these acquisitions to compete, and then it's manifesting itself in their core product as well. So, it's not cheap. So when you invest, you want to make sure you're getting value and time out of it, and we can't afford to keep pivoting, right? So it's just there's no right answer or formula rather, other than, yes, if something really comes along and it's incredibly disruptive and it proves to be meets the business case and the ROI and everything else, then it's probably something we're going to explore. But at some point, knowing that technology is continually evolving, right? You'll always be chasing your tail if you don't just kind of pause, double down on what you have, and then maybe set a 5-year plan to reassess and maybe upgrade.
Yeah, and it's not always about the fanciest tech, right? It's like you said, having to align with the business case, the values of the business needs, timing, I'm sure, I think plays a part. So I am sure there are multiple or various ways of making those decisions, but it sure is tempting to look at look at all the new tech and how fast this space is moving. I mean, you and I were at the conference and we saw a host of things changing. So I can only imagine what this year will bring, but we'll find out soon, right?
HR tech was overwhelming. Hundreds of
Yeah.
hundreds, and every company is an AI company now, right? So, and they're using these terms and trying to sell you. So yes, it is overwhelming navigating that landscape. But I think we have a good North Star in terms of how we approach it.
Just curious, at HR Tech, were there a couple of things that you saw that you really were curious about or you really loved or were intrigued about?
Yes, one specifically. And so currently we're looking at onboarding a next gen high volume hiring platform for our frontline associates. Okay, so this space and that persona has become very competitive in terms of how you attract and retain. And so speed to hire is incredibly important. The tools we have in place today, they're okay, but they're not going to get us to where we want to be. And they're not on par with some of the next gen AI driven platforms. So won't say any names, but there are a couple that I've had several follow-ups and exploring that will be on the shortlist in terms of our assessment and selection.
It's exciting. I think I know who you're talking about, but I'm not going
Probably
to say.
I can tell you offline.
Yeah. Looking ahead, right? Because AI is evolving at breakneck speed. I think I've mentioned that before on the show, but how does PepsiCo plan for agility without falling prey to constantly chasing the latest shiny object in AI innovation?
Yeah, again, did I mention bane of my existence? So you can imagine. So I support these HR COEs and TR and TA and learning and so forth, talent management, and they're going to conferences, they're benchmarking against other clients, right? And they're seeing all this stuff. And so they're bringing that back and, hey, Mark, we should look at this. We should look at this. And again, but it's kind of looking at the next shiny new toy, which is exciting, but it's not practical, right? We can't run the organization that way. So it's balanced, right? It's balanced, like I alluded to earlier. It's, hey, how do you, and in some ways, how we deal with that is, what I would recommend is you start small, and you maybe POC something or do a small scope and see how that proves out. Invariably, as you're doing that, things are going to change, and there's enhancements or new tech that you can then pivot. But at some point, you've got to pull the trigger and say, okay, are we now ready to scale more broadly, maybe even globally? But once you do that, you've got to get the return on your investment, right? You can't continually invest. We want to invest. We are investing. But there's a balance there in terms of when we start pivoting and looking at new solutions.
And AI also brings sort of philosophical questions about work. So do you see it enhancing human potential at PepsiCo, or is there concern about over-reliance on technology replacing human judgment?
Yeah, I mean, I think the sentiment. So yes, I do see it enhancing human potential significantly, as we discussed earlier. Productivity. Some people may say AI makes you dumb. Some people would say it makes you smarter because it's enhancing your capabilities and your knowledge. So, I'm more on it enhances you and your productivity. But there is today already, folks are concerned about AI, being used to replace human judgment. Right? I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we'll be there for some time. But it's advancing so rapidly. Who's to say? But I would say, yes, it is a concern today, but it's not necessarily a concern for me or for PepsiCo as we sit here today.
Finally, for leaders in similar roles, really grappling with AI adoption, what advice would you give to balance innovation with responsibility and long-term strategy?
Yeah, I would say, first and foremost, understand responsible AI. Have a framework. Look at OECD or, benchmark with other companies to understand what they're doing. That's key. Those are your guardrails. So you should have that in place before you look at anything. And then really don't do AI for the sake of AI. Don't be seduced by it. Don't get too involved in the hype or have FOMO. Okay. Really understand the practical applicability to your organization. And to the question you asked earlier, what are you actually trying to solve for? Make sure there's that. Make sure you understand the business case, the ROI, right? And you do that, because that's how we approach it as well. We may not have full measures in terms of how we measure the ROI, but we understand the applicability, and we know, at least anecdotally, that it's moving the needle in terms of productivity and it's adding value, right? And then we'll figure out sort of how to quantify that a little better as we continue to evolve.
Well, Mark, thank you for sharing your journey with AI at PepsiCo and the thoughtful approach you're taking to integrate it responsibly into HR. It's really clear that while AI offers incredible opportunities, its success truly aligns in aligning with its organizational goals and meeting it where it's at. So thank you for being here.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure.
If today's episode captured your interest, please consider sharing it with a friend and leaving a review. To learn more about how CPO Playbook can support you or a leader you know with executive coaching or organizational transformation, visit us at cpoplaybook.com. Your support as a subscriber means the world to us, so thank you for tuning in. I'm Felicia Shakiba. Let's connect on LinkedIn. See you next Wednesday.